PewPewNationTV, we finally did it. Enjoy. Hey guys, welcome. PewPewNationTV. We finally did it, man. We're here. YouTube, first official launch video of the show. Super excited, man, to get this thing finally off the ground. I am so happy, man, that you guys are here checking us out. If you're here for the first time, welcome. If you're a repeat offender, welcome anyways, right? Anyway, today I got something that I want to launch with, which is very important. This documentary basically that I want to share with you guys is called Doomed to Repeat It. Basically, why is this important? Why does it matter? Especially coming from a 2A platform. It is very important, okay? Especially if you focus on chapter 4 of this documentary that I'm going to play for you. Basically what it is, it's something that was put together that was actually shared with me by a good friend. And they urged, hey, you really need to check this thing out. All right, it's really that important, especially for what you're talking about on your show. Those of you out there that have already, chimed into the channel and subscribed, I can't tell you how grateful I am, even though this is going to be the very first piece of content that's going to go up there. But I appreciate the efforts and the support. It speaks volumes to me. It really does, and I'm grateful for all of you out there. Those of you that listen to the podcast, thank you. I'm grateful for that too. Keep listening, because I'm still going to keep doing a radio show every week. And then we're going to be doing more video content here on the channel. Like I said, it's in the description and stuff like that. And also check out the descriptions that are going to be left down below for any links, of course, for vendors, for contributors, and anything along those lines. Feel free to leave comments. I implore you, please leave comments on what you thought of the video. And again, as the ticker says there on the bottom, if you're getting value out of the video that you're about to see, please smash that like button. Let's go ahead and share it as much as we can. And let's, most importantly, subscribe to the channel, because we are on a mission. We're on a mission to get to our first 1,000 subscribers and also 4,000 hours of watch time, which is something that is required by YouTube. So we can finally get this long awaited project monetized, and it's all going to be for the benefit of you, our audience, to improve gear, show quality, and stuff like that. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. And again, please, most of you have probably heard or maybe even seen some of the footage, that's going to be presented in this documentary. I will tell you this, it is not for the faint at heart. Some of the images in this documentary are very graphic. So if you have kids in the room, I'm just letting you know right now, you may want to have them leave the room. And please, because some of it is kind of graphic, but it is reality. Okay, it's truth, which is one of the reasons why I love doing this and kicking this off the ground, is just to be straightforward and bring you facts, not conspiracy theory or fiction or anything like that. All right. So with that said, I'm going to go ahead and cue this thing up, because we are semi-live here. And let's go ahead and kick off Doomed to Repeat It. Again, focus on chapter 4. Chapter 4 is probably the most important chapter out of this entire thing. Not that the rest of it is not important. Why? Because it is directly pointing at the Second Amendment, the 2A. And that's critical, because we are at that stage right now. We have to protect the Second Amendment. We have to remain very vigilant when it comes to protecting the Second Amendment. So let's kick this off. And I'll be back to react when I hear or see something pertinent that we've talked about before. Okay, so let's go.
Hi, I'm Doug Barry, Executive Director of Doomed to Repeat It. I want to thank each and every one of you who have supported this project, this film. Without your support, this does not get done. This is a very important story that we've told here. We've worked on this for quite a while. It needs to get out to as many people as possible. This is the first of many projects that we intend to produce. And what it does is it reminds us of the importance of being vigilant. I hope and pray that it will reach many hearts, many lives, and that you will share it wide and far. Look at the state of our world, and please do anything and everything that you can in any way, shape, or form to defend and protect what is good, what is right, and what is true.
Whatever's behind this is in the open. In the open. I wouldn't look for anything secretive. I wouldn't look for a single secret memo. I wouldn't look for a single confiscated email or a single secret text.
People are in the habit of thinking, okay, these guys are up to no good. They're acting in bad faith. They're not telling us the truth. Our natural assumption is that that's being done secretly, clandestinely. It's a group of guys gathering in a back room with the shades drawn.
It's nobodies, small bureaucrats that do the greatest evil, not driven by ideology, just wanting to impress their boss, or thoughtlessness. Thousands of little people making little decisions that send millions of people to gas chambers.
There's an old saying, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. You see these patterns again and again.
Man.
Gonna stop right there for a moment. You heard what he said. History repeats itself. There are certain patterns. And this is one of the things that I basically shared, you know, on the podcast, on the radio show. And I've also shared when I was invited to come out and join Jeff Davis, you know, at Freedom to Think podcast on his show also as well. And we spoke about this. Okay. And basically it's, you know, all of this stuff repeats itself. And I can say that because I've lived it. Okay. I've mentioned that numerous times before. Okay. The problem is that if you don't recognize the patterns, if you don't see what's coming, okay, and you're not aware to what's actually happening in the country right now, you're going to miss it. You're going to miss these patterns. And they talk about it here. Okay. Because again, at the foundation, it's just, you're hitting rewind and you're hitting play again on the same movie over and over again. Pay attention closely to this because you're going to notice a lot of things that are currently happening in the country right now that will directly relate to what they're just talking about here. Okay, let's keep going.
Mass formation psychosis. A psychosis is a mental state of irrationality, if you will, of things not making sense, and there's a contagious nature to it.
What you see if you really study history, human nature never changes. I mean, the conditions of life, with technology and economy and all of this, that changes. There's a part of us that has not changed at all in thousands and thousands of years. And we're still very emotional, inclined to aggression. If we're afraid, we become easy to manipulate.
And unfortunately, I think that in the end, you know what really ends it?
My name is Lola Suarez Mooney. I'm from Cuba, where I was born and raised until I was 19 years old. And then I was thrown in prison by the communist regime of Fidel Castro. I was born and raised in Cuba and never thought I was going to leave my country until I was 19. Loved it. My mother had 7 girls first with a boy in between. Then she kept going. Then she had 5 boys with a girl in between. So altogether we're 14. I was very close to my dad and he was a wonderful man. Because we were 14, my parents hardly ever took us out to dinner. You know, going to a restaurant, the bill would have been out of this world. So we ate at home and the food, I don't ever remember once not having food. We were counting our pennies, but the country was abundant. I don't ever remember anybody being hungry that I ever knew.
So one of the first things that you see when tyrants step in to try to take over is they need to present themselves as a savior. So they'll paint this picture of a utopia, and they'll show the people what good they can do, what they can create out of the problem that they see before them at that time. So when Batista was ruling, he did it with a very heavy hand. He was known for the corruption, the brutality, the torture. This, of course, terrified the people. So this gave Fidel Castro a great opportunity to come in and be their savior. When he did, of course, the people thought they were being rescued as Batista was taken out of power. So tyrants don't come waltzing in wearing your typical bad guy attire. They're not going to come in with that bad guy scary look. They're going to come in with a disguise. They're going to present themselves in a way that says to the people, you can trust me. I've got a plan.
The democratic process with Batista did not work. He was a military man and he decided to take over. So the power went now to the military. And in order to stay in power, he would persecute those that would oppose him. In fact, 4 of my college friends were killed. So he was killing people in order to stay in power.
All right, just to pause there really, really quick. You're starting to get a glimpse of Mrs. Mooney here. Okay, Mrs. Mooney, just to let you guys know, her father, last name Suarez, well, there is some descendants here. Okay, when we lived in South Florida, we had a mayor in the city of Miami. Last name was Suarez also as well. Okay, they are descendants of this family. All right. I'm going to probably go out and say it was the son of her dad. Although I may not probably have agreed fully 100% with his politics when he was mayor of Miami. I mean, he wasn't horrible, but then again, he wasn't, he didn't overwhelm me or a lot of people for that matter. Why? Well, typical politician, when you buy into it and you sell your soul a little bit to, special interests and things along those lines, it makes you want to change. But he really wasn't a horrible dude. But then again, it is what it is. This way you have a little bit of, you can connect the dots a little bit here with her and whatnot. So let's go ahead and continue on with chapter 2.
How do the guys running a country, how do the rulers, how do they expand their power? How do they extend their power? And what you see rhyming in history is it's been a very common gambit amongst the ruling class to, if they perceive that the citizenry is discontent, doesn't feel like they're getting a good shake, that the rulers are getting all of the spoils and leaving nothing to the citizens, then a good strategy for dealing with that is to invoke a threat. And that threat throughout history, it's commonly been foreigners, possible foreign invasions, pirates, foreign agents, disaffected conspirators within your own society.
Open borders, foreigners, exchanging. I mean, think about this. Again, like I said earlier, connect the dots. All right, what he's talking about here is currently happening right now. Here's fear. Okay, read these little tidbits too. I may go ahead and pause those, okay, while we're going through so you can get a better understanding of the message here, okay? Let's keep going.
It's amazing how, kids want to learn about the brain and what's going on. So we have this model of saying like, well, if you get your fist like that, and use your thumbs, you put it together. And so you have this model of, that's what your brain's like. And it's, kids can get that. And then you say like, well, the place where your thumbs are, that's that prefrontal cortex. That's the part that's saying, hey, I'm smart, I'm wise, I'm loving, I'm helpful, and I really want to care. Then if we open that up and say, like, right, that little place where those tips of my fingers are, that's it. My amygdala is just right there. It's just inside. And saying, like, that's the part that's like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. You're going to reject me. You hate me. You'll never like me again. You have your amygdala. That's just this fight, flight, protective place. It has a purpose. It's protecting you. And then you have this part of me that's been growing throughout my life and getting educated, made it through college. That's like, I know how to help. I know what to do. I'm caring. I'm good. I'm helpful. Just ask me. I'd give you a ride. So that place of sorting out, I have two reactions, two places inside me. And part of the work in therapy is to sort out that little string of thoughts that you have going in your head. So it's not just one little string of thoughts that you have going, it's actually two places that are going at the same time. And so learning to sort that out into the two paths is to give you control back. And then I can choose, do I follow this fight-flight reaction, or do I follow that more, sensible, thoughtful, respond instead of react?
The most important lecture that I have seen concerning the elements of the human psychological and psychosocial response to the pandemic was given in an interview format, now in a couple times, by Professor Matthias Desmet. He's at the University of Ghent in Belgium. This is very important. His research has been on what's called mass formation, and then in parentheses is psychosis. Mass formation psychosis. And a psychosis is a mental state of irrationality, if you will, of things not making sense, and there's a contagious nature to it. When individuals are irrational, and yet it spreads to other individuals, almost as contagious or more contagious than the virus we're talking about, SARS-CoV-2.
I tried to understand what was happening in a population, in the world, in a society, that in one way or another, we were so blind for very important aspects of reality.
What Dr. Desmet says is there's 4 conditions that are needed to understand this process. The first one deals with isolation. So we start to lose our connection in talking to people. We started out, I mentioned about doctors no longer meeting anymore. We had rules that came down, we couldn't have more than 10 people in a room. Before you knew it, we weren't meeting in a room. So the first criteria is isolation. The second criteria is being removed from things that one likes to do. The third criteria has to do with free-floating anxiety. The idea that there's a general sense of anxiousness that can't be pinpointed. Everyone is just in general anxious. And you see this by a non-specific response, like wearing a mask when you're driving alone in a car. That's free-floating anxiety. The last and most important criteria is when the first 3 things are present, then being offered a solution. So when you have these 4 conditions, they all have to be there. There can actually be a mass formation that's taken place, and this is exactly what's happened.
If you didn't buy into the narrative, if you didn't want to go along with the narrative, or if you tried to say something critical about the narrative, then people indeed blamed you of showing lack of solidarity and lack of citizenship. Yes. And I think that is extremely typical for the psychological dynamic and the psychological process that I have been describing, the process of mass formation.
I think Matthias Desmet is going to be right, that in the end, you know what really ends it? Worldwide catastrophe. That's what ends it. That's what ended it in Nazi Germany. And he could be right. What's going to end it here is sadly worldwide catastrophe. The masses are too big. The psychosis is too strong. The brainwashing is too far gone.
If we broke anxiety down into a range from 0 to 100, and what we're looking at is, say, we'll break it into 5 different places. So 0 to 20. That would be, like mild stress. That's the kind of stress that's really actually helpful. You're going to do better on a test. You're going to perform better in sports. You're going to remember things. Oh, I need to do this and get ready for work and take all these things to work. You're going to function well. You're learning. You're able to integrate information, and you're actually able to reach goals. If we go to that second level, that 20 to 40 range. At that point, I'm starting to get tunnel vision. I'm not seeing the whole picture anymore. I'm just seeing this one issue. I can still learn, and I can still get new information, and I can grow from that. From that, I'm going to do things, but I'm really focusing on this one issue that's bothering me rather than, the bigger picture and how it fits into the rest of my life. That third range, 40 to 60, I'm halfway up the stress scale. At this point, what I'm doing is not tunnel vision anymore. It's disconnected details. And so I'm responding to this detail, and then I'm jumping to that detail. And so it isn't even integrated into a whole picture at this point. And I'm only halfway up the stress scale. So in society, as we're dealing with this, there's been, pandemic, all the stress from people's jobs and health issues and family members, and as people are starting to, react to each other. It's like, well, society's kind of in that middle range already. So like learning is really hard to do and might not be possible, but we're only halfway up. So then if we go to the next stage, that 60 to 80 range, now we're in panic. And in panic, you have distorted details. There's still some connection to reality, but it's kind of like something happens and then it's way blown out of proportion. And that's where you get panic attacks and those kind of things. It feels like you're going through a heart attack. And then that last stage, 80 to 100, is terror. And at terror, I'm completely overwhelmed, and the hassle of, if I'm in that state of terror long-term, it's fatal. Your brain is set to heal. Just like if you get a cut, your body heals, the cut goes away. Your emotions are trying to do the same thing. Your brain's trying to do the same thing. It's trying to go from upset to calm, from anxiety to calm. It's trying to get there on a biology level.
When a mass emerges in a society, then a new kind of solidarity emerges, and a new social bond. And this new solidarity and new social bond is radically intolerant to dissident voices.
One of the most recent examples that we all know of is the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. Now, this is a perfect example of how tyrants don't need to come up with something completely out of the blue. They don't have to make it up. They can take something that is actually rooted in some truth. There is some fact to it, but it's how they manipulate it, how they twist it. That's how it can become this gateway into controlling fear and emotion and oppressing people's freedoms.
Wow. Oppressing people's freedoms. Okay, remember, controlling the narrative, controlling the speech. At the foundation, at the core of all of this, the plan is always the same. I've said this again before, okay? It just is, all right? The foundation of the rules for radicals are always the same. It's just the narrative, the speech, the verbiage. That is the only thing that changes. And this is why I've mentioned before, you have to be aware of this. You have to know what's going on. You got to be able to read between the lines and figure out, what is it that they're really telling me here, And where do you see this? You see this in schools. You see this out in public. You see the signs everywhere, okay? How many of you have seen those little stickers on sidewalks or in stores that says, social distance, telling you, hey, you need to stay 6 feet apart from each other. Remember that? Okay, that was something. Or masks must be worn. Okay, fine. What happened? I mean, all of a sudden from, one day to the next, this just all faded away little by little, little by little. It just went away. And now you have the CDC that has come out and admittedly has stated by the director of the CDC that, we screwed up. We made a mistake. We kind of like missed the ball here after they put everybody through a living hell. Okay. And all of you that were affected by this know exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. Now, this is not to get off of our focus here and go down another rabbit hole. He is just trying to lay out a fabric, if you will, and just start to connect the dots as to where we are going, where we have transitioned as a republic. Okay. Because honestly, if you guys go back to 2017, 2018, okay, everything was cool, right? Everything was okay for the most part. But after the pandemic, everything changed. The world changed. Society changed. People changed, okay? It was this up here. This just went to another level. And he talk about it here. Anxiety. How many of you are suffering from anxiety? I know some of you are, okay? Yours truly suffers from anxiety from now and then because of all this crap. And now it's getting worse because of all the shortages, you know, inflation, price hikes and stuff like that. We are going down a path, a certain path that if you're not aware and you're not in tune to where this is leading up to, and this is what this video, this documentary is going to explain to you, you're going to figure it out and there's going to be a big lesson to be learned. Now, honestly, I probably won't do anything like this again in the future because of time. And that's okay. That's not really the foundation or what this is, my channel is really about. Okay, it's not going to be like a political show, if you will. There'll be some stuff in there, but not really that much. There are other platforms that will give you this. But I just wanted to launch this just to set a foundation as to why I'm doing this, for whom I'm doing this, which is you, our audience, okay? So you can have a little bit more knowledge and just a little bit more of an expansion, if you will, as to what's going on in our world and why it is so important that we hold on to our constitutional rights, why we defend our constitutional rights at any measure whatsoever, okay? Without getting violent, of course, all right? So let's continue on now with the next chapter.
When Fidel came and he said, in 6 months, I'm going to do an election. My revolution is as green as the palm trees. Everybody was excited. Everybody thought, he's the savior. But we never suspected the real truth. There was a person called Che Guevara who was from Argentina, and he had penetrated the revolution, and he is the brain behind converting the country to communism. However, there is evidence that Fidel had already read the Communist Manifesto and had already mentally bought the idea that the government has to control everything. But that's not what he told us. So all the experts are constantly arguing at what moment did he totally turn to Russia and totally convince himself that to stay in power had to do that. But was he intellectually, years before, reading about Marxism and believing in it? You wonder, how do they keep control? The control is by fear.
So the tyrant never uses phrases or wording such as, we need to control you, we want you to give up your freedoms. No, instead they use other terminology. They say things like, we need to work together to stop this threat to all of society. We need to care about one another. That means some sacrifices we all have to make. These are the steps that they take. So Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, along with all the other tyrants throughout history, from Julius Caesar to Attila the Hun to Adolf Hitler to Stalin himself, they fool people. They fool people at first. How do we think they actually arrive at so much power? The people are willing to hand it over because they're united. So many of them, by this point, have been united in the fear and the emotion of the moment.
And so the ruling class, or the emperor, or the dictator, or whoever, says, I need to extend my police and military power in order to ferret out and destroy the threat to our society or our nation. So be afraid, grant me power, or greater power, to protect you from this threat. In this scenario, which you see, it's common throughout history, you have this shift of the balance of power. The ruling class is acquiring more and more of it, more privileges, more control over resources, and the citizenry is becoming ever more subjected to this. You incite fear amongst those who you're ruling, and in a state of fear, the human mind is not very good at careful reasoning.
In Cuba, it was a change immediately, when Fidel took over, and we were all so enthusiastic because we thought, okay, finally we're going to go back to the democratic process, and we were totally fooled. But at that moment that he won and he came to Havana, we were all supporting him. Not my dad, not some of the very intellectual people. They saw little signs, but he immediately took over. And my dad was the dean of engineering at the university. And we had a house just across from the university. And within 2 weeks of Fidel being in power, he sent his militiamen to take over the university and forced it to be closed. And he forced all the Catholic universities to be closed. The persecution against religion started immediately, and taking away the freedoms of people. In the case of Cuba, they see God, believe in God as the enemy. They watch who goes to church, and if you go to church, you're persecuted.
Let's pause there for a moment. I want you guys to read this. Read it very carefully. Make the lie big. Make it simple. Keep saying it, and eventually they will believe it. The lie. I think the CDC just admitted to their lie. I'm just going to use that as an example. This whole damn thing was a lie. Yeah, people did get sick. Yours truly got sick. I was in ICU for 29 days in the summer of 2020. Okay, I had massive ass pneumonia. Okay, damn near died. Okay, I'm just here to tell you, was it a lie? No, a lot of people got sick. It's the after effect that was a big damn lie. And the CDC just admitted to it. They finally came clean and they said, we dropped the ball, we screwed up. Okay, all this mass shit, all right, and all this other stuff. Right, it's very simple to sit there and grab a freaking envelope full of pens and stroke a signature on $780 billion for this Green New Deal or whatever, or, freaking Inflation Redemption, whatever act bullshit that Biden just signed off on. And, oh, God, did I say that here? God, I hope I don't get canned for that, but whatever, I don't care. Now, nobody wearing a mask, and all of a sudden he just throws it on? Okay, so what happened before? The virus knows. It's that smart. It's that intelligent to know. It's okay. I'm not going to infect you now, but wait. Okay, now I'm going to infect you. Go ahead, put it on quickly. The lie. They will lie to you, and they will repeat it over and over and over and over again until the people start believing it. And this guy was the Nazi minister of propaganda, Hitler. Again, history repeats itself. It repeats itself. But the message, the underlying message is always the same. Let's keep going.
Every warring power had something like a department of propaganda. And it was to condition the people to be willing to go to war with these other countries, conditioning mothers to accept that their sons are being killed in the trenches, conditioning the citizenry to purchase war bonds to fund the war. So propaganda, I think, as we recognize it, really developed during the First World War. How do you create fear and loathing? But also, how do you create positive associations, desire, sort of seduction of positive association that will make you want to buy a product?
The media in Cuba is non-existent. When my dad was there and he wrote a letter to the editor and so forth, at that point, everything that was going to be published, the government would put something behind it. Then after that, they took the newspapers over. Newspapers in Cuba don't exist. There's only one newspaper owned by the government, and everybody just uses it in the bathroom to clean themselves because there's no toilet paper.
Tyrants will always exist. And what they want to do is they want to own us, okay? They want to control us. And a lot of the ways they do that is through their propaganda, their indoctrination. People call that their narrative, right? And you've got a lot of people who, again, aren't connected to God, who are easily then manipulated away from God. What's the prescription
okay, to get us back to a culture that's strong and that tyrants aren't invited into this culture. We need to get very, very connected to God again. We need a revival. We truly do.
When you have somebody in government saying like, now here's the new crisis, now here's this, do this is what you need to do. And I'm in that emotional window, it's like, oh, that's reasonable, I'll do that. And they'll follow it because of the state of emotion that they're in. If they were calm, they're just like, no, that doesn't make sense, I won't do it. That's kind of a hassle. And so the problem that we're dealing with is we have to keep society in a certain level of stress to get the things to work. The stuff they're doing is pretty much what we're seeing in patterns in history, that they keep you scared. But they're doing a multi-pronged approach this time to say like, here's how you're good or bad. Here's how other people are good or bad. Now we're going to label those guys. Those guys, we're the good ones, they're the bad ones. And if we can keep you in that level of stress, you'll respond to that label, you won't check it out. And then you'll react and do stuff to family members that you would have never done 2-3 years ago. And it doesn't matter, both sides are doing the same thing. If you disagree with us, you're the bad guy.
Yep. Canceled.
I'm a big fan of a Stanford professor, a late Stanford professor named René Girard. And he wrote these beautiful essays. He spent his whole life studying the phenomenon of scapegoating. We see references to something like this happening in the Old Testament. And Girard's theory of it was during times of stress and rivalry in a society, call it the tribe, there are things that are making the tribe very uneasy or stressed out. Maybe the crops failed. Maybe there's pressure being exerted from the neighboring tribe. And you'll have a rivalry between two guys who are vying with each other for power over the tribe. And it's oftentimes within this context of something like stress and rivalry, you will see the scapegoating phenomenon emerge and become very virulent. We've got all these problems, nothing works, a lot of people are unhappy, a lot of people feel threatened, resentful. The way to understand this is he's responsible for it, or that group is responsible for it. If there's some advantage to be gained by blaming the problems that everyone is feeling on this minority, then suddenly what is a complex problem with multiple factors that no one can really understand, now you make it very easy to understand. It's their fault. Get rid of them and all our problems will be solved.
These are children who survived at Auschwitz. Their parents and relatives had been murdered by poison gas. Most of them have forgotten their names and have nothing left to identify them except the numbers the Nazis tattooed on their arms.
How did the contagious thought pattern spread from person to person? How did people in the United States ever think that eugenics was a good idea? How did that happen? We had actually eugenics programs. The Rockefeller Foundation funded this. How did the very first family in Nazi Germany volunteer up their child to be euthanized and think that was a good idea? In the hubris of Nazism, it happened. The point is, it happens. And we are in a worldwide mass psychosis now. It's a freight train.
It's always sort of the same. They have these enthusiasms that sweep society, right? And people get swept away. Rene Girard said that the only thing more powerful than the spirit of the mob or the spirit of the age is the Holy Spirit. It's a mystery. You seem to wonder. Even Peter, Rene Girard writes about Peter's denial. When did Peter deny Christ? Where was Peter when he denied Christ? He was in the crowd. He was in the crowd. Now, he was swept away by the spirit of the crowd. And that's what we're seeing today. And I see this, what Rene Girard calls this mimetic contagion. I see this crowd that's being swept away against this victim.
An idea will catch hold, and it's very rooted in primitive emotion, anger, fear, resentment, and it starts to spread like a contagion, like an infectious disease. But it's not a disease of the body, it's a disease of the mind. And this phenomenon of mass psychosis, where people are just acting crazy and overly emotional, and I think we find ourselves in an example of mass psychosis.
There you have it. Mass psychosis. You guys are starting to connect the dots, I hope, by this point in time. Okay? Everything that is being shown to you, everything that is being portrayed up to this point is just basically one big, gigantic history lesson. Okay? A lot of your rap artists out there, like, I just got to throw a little caveat in there because, again, I'm like really, really stoked that Jeff over at Freedom to Think podcast and, had me over, and we started doing reaction videos to, Tom McDonald, right? Which I had never heard of the guy before at all, honestly. Jeff kind of turned me on to his music, a while back. Hey, this guy named Tom McDonald, he's preaching, our language and stuff like that through rap music and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, cool, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But I had never really sat down and took a listen to his music until we did that whole video. And please reach out to him, right? F2 Freedom to Think podcast. Okay. He's on all the socials. All right. You can find him on YouTube also as well. Reach out to him, give him a like and a subscribe. He's a really good guy. He's got an excellent platform. I got to admit, and I look forward to going back, and sitting with him a little bit, just a little intro here to him. But he's really, really good. I'm very proud of him. He's done a great job with his content and his show. But one of the things about Tom McDonald is he talks in his music about what is really actually going on right now and where the sentiment and the emotion of the country is. And this is it. You're getting it right here in your face. Now, here we are, chapter 4. I talked about this in the very beginning. Out of this entire documentary, although it is very good and very important from a historical point and from a knowledge and a learning point, this one here is the reason why I chose to do this, is because this is, to me, is probably the most important chapter out of the entire piece. Why? Pay very, very, very close attention here, okay? And the reason being is because yours truly, right here, and not to keep beating a dead horse, I was 8 years old when they came and they knocked on my dad and my mom's door at home down in Cuba, okay? And they came in and they confiscated the weapons. Dad only had 2. He had a side-by-side stagecoach shotgun, and he had a little .22 rifle that he used to go hunt with. That was it, all right? They knew that we had them because of the registrations, so they came door to door systematically and asked if we would volunteer the weapons up for the cause, for the revolution, okay? Because, the Imperial Yankees up north, the Americans were going to invade us any day now, and we're basically done. So, and we have a shortage. Remember that. We have a negative surplus of arms. You understand the message here? A shortage, okay? We need you to volunteer. In other words, you're doing us a favor. If you would just contribute your weapons, all right? And you don't need them anymore because you have us to protect you now. Remember what he said earlier in this documentary. They're never going to talk to you and portray themselves as the bad guy. Okay? They're always going to pander to you. They're always going to tell you that they're on your side. Okay? And they're building, I was going to go back to the 87,000 IRS they just, hired, and they're armed and authorized to use deadly force. I mean, and, Mrs. Mooney talks about, the militia, but not the good militia, the bad militia and his men. You're going to hear about that a little more coming up now, okay? Same thing. Again, remember, it's portrayed a little differently, but when you read between the lines, it's exactly the same plan. This is the road that we are currently on. Chapter 4, remember this, hug this, embrace this, because this is our saving grace, is this one right here. All right, so let's continue. What does that say? I'm sorry, I just have to. To conquer a nation, first disarm its citizens. Aha! I think they're trying to do that right now. Why? Because they already have everything else, people.
Very, very soon after he took over, he imposed all kind of laws against owning your own arms. He forced everybody to come and return the arms, and he had the biggest militia of all of Central and South America. So he enhanced his power by hiring and getting more police and more militia to have more control.
Owning weapons in Cuba was not illegal, as it is not in the United States. But the trick is convincing people to turn over those weapons.
Gun buybacks.
The government was very convincing, saying that now that Batista was out of power, there was no need for anyone to be armed, that they were protected by the current government. So many people, perhaps most people, turned over the weapons voluntarily. And also, the government made it more difficult. If you had a weapon, you had to justify, why do you own this weapon?
Are we going to get into a situation where we really have to think long and hard about the Second Amendment? First is the freedom of speech and conscience and the right to association. And then the Second Amendment is the freedom to bear arms for the citizenry, not a professional army, but for the citizens. They didn't perceive the Second Amendment to be a matter of safeguarding your right to go out and pop off, your AR-15 at beer cans. No, it has a political significance. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the defense of the Republic. That's the first clause. The right to bear arms shall not be infringed. And, for years, I didn't think about the Second Amendment. I didn't think about it. But now, you kind of wonder, what were the Founding Fathers thinking when they made that the Second Amendment? And I think the idea is, well, there may come a time where the only safeguarding of the citizenry from the depredations of the state is the freedom to bear arms. So I don't want it to go there, but it kind of looks like we may be headed that way.
When Castro comes into power, 1959 could be described as a bloodbath in Cuba. So again, we're going back to the element of fear. You could lose what you prize the most, which is your life. They would pick you up, they will have no due process, and they'll put you in front of a firing squad and kill you. And further, they would broadcast the executions on television. So that is a very, very powerful incentive not to step out of line.
The government is saying, you got to do it this way, and if you don't, we'll fine you. Then we'll add the pressure a little more, we'll take your business. Pressure a little more, we'll take your family members. And then, no, we'll take you. And it's just that with the fear of death, fear of losing, is it, am I losing my money? Am I losing my business? Am I losing my family members? Am I losing my life? They just work through using fear to say, we're using all or nothing, it's back brain. All or nothing, we will solve the problem by killing these people. And the problem will be better. French Revolution, same thing. It's like, oh, we'll just, those guys that are resisting us, they're bad, kill them. Yep. But then that didn't solve the problem, because then they had, oh, we're thinking that you're thinking against us, then it was thought police, and we'll kill those guys.
Antifa would bring guillotines and put them in front of people's houses, elected officials and others. You look at cancel culture. The cancel culture is the culture of death. And the cancel culture can quickly descend into the types of horrible violence we saw in the French Revolution, the Bolshevik Revolution, that we saw in Cambodia with the Khmer Rouge. And they're influenced by the very same ideologies. They take as a symbol the guillotine. And I think that's very important, because the guillotine is, you take this bad person, this person that's disrupting the good of the community, and you lop off their head, and then we'll have order. Oh, you lop off his head, and is there order? Is there peace? Is there justice? Is there prosperity? No. Okay, well, we found these guys. Now lop off these guys' heads, and they're the bad guys. We'll take all of these people, this ethnic community. Okay, then this is going to be it, and it never ends. In the French Revolution, they would call the guillotine holy, the holy guillotine.
The holy guillotine. Keep understanding in what you're on what you're seeing here, okay? Because, you know, my thing is, you know, the people will not understand the importance of the Second Amendment until it's too late. Notice what he said here a little while ago. People surrendered their guns. Not all of them. Most of them did surrender their guns. My dad surrendered his guns, but not, well, semi-voluntarily. Why? Because, you know, he had 4 guys in olive drab uniforms, you know, strapped with AK-47s around their necks, okay? Basically telling you, volunteer your weapons to us. We need them. And you can't say no. You can't say no, because if you say no, they would escort you outside and they'd take you away and we would never see you again. Understand my point here? Okay? Everything is verbiage. You cannot surrender your Second Amendment. You cannot give up your weapons, because when you do, you give up your freedom. And that's the bottom line. It's done. It's over. Look at all the countries that have done so already. Okay? They are now living on their knees. Shall I rattle off a few? Cuba, Venezuela, Canada, yeah, Australia, New Zealand, China. Shall I go on? Russia. Yeah, that's right. The Russians can't own guns either. Only the military can. That's it. Let's keep going.
In 1961, the Bay of Pigs invasion took place. This was a CIA trained and backed effort using about 1,500 Cuban exiles to invade Cuba and overthrow Castro's government and replace it with a new government. It failed miserably. It was at this moment that Castro took immediate and extreme action to round up and crush any and all resistance to his regime.
We already knew the Bay of Pigs was going to take place. And that morning, we got up, and in the little radio, we could hear that the landing had taken place in a place called Bahía de Cochinos. That is the Bay of Pigs. And we heard it in the radio that morning. And around lunchtime, I look out the window, and my house was surrounded by militiamen. So they came to the house, and they said everybody above 12 goes to prison. The boy I was dating had given me a gun. And fortunately, I had told one of my dad's employees who was visiting, what do I do with this gun? So he buried it in the garden. And 3 hours after that, the militiamen came and they walked through the garden and I could see their boots stepping on top of it, but they never found it. Later on, we find out that on that day, Fidel had sent all of his militiamen all over the country to put people in prison. And I always tell people, try to think of a number. How many prisoners can you pick in one day? Now I'm going to tell you, 100,000. So they put us in a van outside and they took us to prison. I was really so scared. I knew things were bad then. They woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning for an interrogation. Me and my 2 sisters went for the interrogation. The good news is that they didn't know anything about me, but I could see my dad. It was the first time in my entire life that I saw my dad with his head down, and I could tell that he was really, really worried. From there, we were in this temporary prison for a couple of weeks. Then they moved him to La Cabaña, which is the fortress, and they moved me and my 2 sisters to a woman's prison in Guanabacoa. My dad was in La Cabaña, where he could hear the executions. And there's a story that says that Che Guevara wrote to his father a letter saying, I like to hear the executions. I like the smell of blood. And the more I smell it, the more I like it. And over there in that fortress, there was a special window where it was said that Che Guevara will stand in that window and hear the executions. My dad personally helped some of the ones that were about to be executed. And my dad was a very religious man. He helped them pray. He prepared them. In the meantime, I went to the women's prison. And I could see among the other women prisoners, they're scared. One of them in particular, she knew her husband was going to be executed. One night, we saw the guard was flirting with one of the women prisoners in the 2nd floor. And all of a sudden, the 2 of them disappeared and went to a room next door. We all know what was going to happen. And we were surprised that the woman allowed herself to be, sexually abused. But the next day, this is what we found out. Her husband was in the 1st floor, a prisoner too, and he was diabetic, and he needed diabetic medicine. So what we found out is that she had agreed with this militiaman to let him rape her if he would get medicines for her husband. And in my heart, I always wonder, what would I have done? If I wanted to save my husband? And we hear those stories often. Some of those women later on went to the worst prison in Guanajuato. And the stories we hear was that many of them were raped. Some of them were raped with a broom. They would not wait at anything. They do anything they want.
In view of all these radical changes that were happening in Cuba, one of the fears, or the main fear that the parents had, was that their parental rights would be taken away and the children would be taken away. they began to realize that there was really no future, or at least not the future that they wanted for the children in Cuba.
The women there who were in prison that had children, the government and the schools forced those children to go to the demonstrations and support Castro. And the teachers will train those children to spy on the parents. Even after a lot of women got out of prison and a lot of men got out of prison, they couldn't talk because everybody was spying on them. And the children are victims, you know.
Here in the United States, a Catholic Church, in conjunction with the CIA, they were putting together this plan or this program called Operation Peter Pan, whose purpose was to bring unaccompanied children out of Cuba. The children could apply and you get a passport. The Cuban government, after you fulfill all the requirements, then they would say, well, we'll send you a telegram telling you when you're going to fly out. The United States Catholic Church brought out 14,000 children out of Cuba, all ages. They were just toddlers to teenagers. You know, I remember the day I went to get my picture taken for the passport, where I was 14. So you had to have your suitcase ready because a telegram could come any day, and then you were supposed to go to Havana and fly out of there. The ticket had to be paid in American dollars. And I remember very distinctly it was 24 American dollars. I always felt, and so did my family, that the separation would be a very short one. Everyone believed that the communist government would collapse and then everybody would return within months. After I left, and I never did see my family again. I was very, very close to my mother. My mother was a writer herself, but it goes beyond that. And there isn't a day that goes by that I don't think about her, because she really would have been proud of what I've been able to accomplish in literature. And to this day, I feel that void. And if there's one thing that I say that I've missed, is having a relationship with my parents as an adult. I never did return to Cuba. I suppose that I could have, but it's not in the cards for me. For my 21st birthday, my mother wrote me a poem. She was a poet. And the title of the poem is Don't Come Back. I mean, how much, just think about this for a moment. How much love does it take for a person who wants to see me, yet she writes, don't come back? Oh, inacabable distancia, que lleva al alma las ansias de querer, después de casi 5 años de llantos y desengaños, volverte a ver. Tornóse blanco el cabello, triste el mirar, sin destellos de llanto cruel, refleja la casa aquella y naufragué entre la huella de ayer. No vuelvas, que todo es bruma, y que al penar me consuma, roto lazo, que es el presente sombrío, y nuestra patria, bien mío, en pedazos.
One thing that's very hard for me to talk is leaving the prison. They announced it, and I only had 5 or 10 minutes to get my stuff. And I could see the faces of all the other women that have been there in prison with me. One of them, they all started writing notes, you know, send this to my son, send this to my husband, call here. And one of them, I can still see her face. She said, I know I'm gonna lose my husband. I know they're gonna kill him. So she gave me address of her mother and people in her family to call. As you think of your memories, what memories stay with you? It's like if I was there looking at her.
All right, let's stop there for a minute. That was pretty tough to swallow, chapter 4. One thing that I wanted to touch on really, really quick, you know, the gentleman was talking about, you know, the process, the indoctrination process, okay, where the children would actually go and snitch on their parents if, you know, for whatever reason, if they did not sympathize with the system, with the revolution, whatever. Well, you know what? I kind of like had to pause there for a moment because that is part of a very, very aggressive tactic to indoctrinate the kids in school. I'll prove my point here. Some years ago, probably going, you know, some years ago, I'll leave it at that. There was a situation where my they're not nephews, they're more like cousins, kid cousins, right? Here in America, for that matter. You know, they were a lot younger. You know, they came home one day and they were misbehaving, and mom decided that she was going to go ahead and scold them, and they were still misbehaving. They weren't listening and stuff like that. So she did as most, you know, Latino parents would do. She went and got the flip-flop, you know, the chancleta, the chancla, whatever you want to call it. And she's, you know, said, you know, if you don't get in line and behave, you know, you're going to get some of this, right across the rear. And, you know, one of the kids turned around and said, you can't hit me. She goes, what are you talking about? Says, you're not allowed to, because in school they told me that if our parents ever spanked us or even touched us, that we're supposed to go ahead and tell them in school, and they'll call the police on you and you'll get arrested. And I'm like, what? Well, mom being mom, she went ahead and said, really, is that so? Well, here's the phone, you know, go ahead and start dialing them, because no. And, you know, they got a correction right across the backside. And that was the end of that. Cops never showed. And I don't think the kids ever told the teachers either in school. But you see, that's part of the process. It's separating the kids from the family unit, because in the communist playbook, the kids don't belong to you, the parent, they belong to the state. They are a child of the state. You see? But if you're not aware and you're not in tune to the system, okay, which, getting back to Tom McDonald, I got to see that video of the system. I haven't seen that yet. And everybody keeps telling me, hey, you got to watch this. You got to watch this. So maybe we can do a reaction on that one day. I don't know. We'll see. But the system, again, is exactly that. And everything happens in little tiny baby steps, you know, a little move here, a little move there, a little shove here, a little nudge there. You know, this is how it works. It's the progressive movement. Okay. It's a progression. All right. You understand the play on words here? And it's sad, and it's actually happening. It's happening today. And today it's happening even on a grander scale. Even on a grander scale. And you guys can comment. Please comment down below. Leave some comments, especially on this comment right here. A lot of people always talk really, really negatively about, you know, the generations, and especially like your millennials and, you know, your Gen Xers and not your Gen Xers, I'm a Gen Xer, your millennials, your Gen Zs and your Gen Ys and stuff like that, on how screwed up they are and how, you know, disconnected they are. And that might be partially true. Okay. But, you know, our generation has a lot of those too, right? Disconnected, you know, not all, don't have it all together, if you know what I mean. But every generation has, really. The disconnect that I see is this, especially with the younger ones, especially the millennials today. Not all of them, but a good percentage of them, from what I've noticed, they don't stand a chance in hell. You know, when you look at how expensive things are, when you look at, you know, what salaries, the salary scales are at, and I'm not making excuses here, condoning that what they're doing is correct, you know, from that matter, but there's a point to this, so bear with me a minute. They don't stand a chance. If you take a look at how expensive things are today, if you take a look at how expensive it is to rent anything, to buy a house, to do any of that, and then you take a look at what the average young adult, okay, is making in an average job, college education or not college education, it's just what they're making. There's no way in hell they can afford to rent their own place. They can't do it. I mean, here in my area, just recently, you know, you can find a 960 square foot apartment, 1 bedroom, okay, 1 bath, tiny, tiny, tiny space, okay, for $1,600 a month. And that's just rent. That's not counting all your other utilities. That's not counting cars. That's not counting insurance for your car, gas to put in your car. Hey, let's think about that one. Okay, and then food. So doing some quick math in my head, you have to make literally no less than $80,000 a year to be able to survive and live on your own. And yet you have the average young person today that's making maybe between $28,000 to $35,000 a year. And I may be overstepping. Okay. But hey, don't worry. The government is here to take care of you. And this is where you need to draw caution, right? We're going to throw money at you. We're going to give you this. We're going to give you free education, free this, free that, blah, 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 blah. There is no such thing as free. Don't buy into that bullcrap. Don't buy into it, because that's what this is that you're watching here right now. And once they got you up here and they suck you in and you become part of their system, you are now enslaved for the rest of your life. All right? I just wanted to make that point. Let's finish this off.
So as we look around the world, we see war, we see division, we see food shortages, we see astronomical rise in inflation. It's important for us to take a step back, to be a critical thinker, to really look at the much bigger picture at hand.
With what's going on in society, if we stay on this path, we're going to have the same problems that other societies have had, because following that amygdala, it's like it's a wave, it's going to end. So no matter how much tyranny there is, how much oppression, how much, you know, control somebody tries to get, it's going to end. It can't sustain forever.
I do worry about, you know, true civil unrest and possible, you know, armed conflict if more people don't start taking a deep breath and 3 steps back and analyzing this in a rational way. If the state continues to impose all these federal mandates and restrictions and reserving the right to just from one day to the next close businesses, I fear a violent confrontation that, you know, would be a horrible thing.
Where it leads to is the death of the society. It's going to collapse.
The first ways to start to resolve the mass formation deals with relatability. You've got to find something you relate to. You've got to find something to relate to. But there appears to be kind of a numbness to this. People are still numb. Like, where's the outrage?
You're seeing now, I think, at least the beginnings of that peaceful resolve of many rising up. I don't care if you censor me. I don't care if you badmouth me in the press, but they're standing up anyway because they know it's right and they know it needs to be done. That's how the whole revival begins.
So what have the people of America historically stood up and fought for? What have they sacrificed for? What have our soldiers fought, bled, and died for? What is this country all about? What is America? We are not a country built on ideologies. We are a country built on truth. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
I came to the United States right after I got out of prison after the Bay of Pigs invasion, 1961. I thought I was going to go back to Cuba in 2 or 3 years. It never occurred to me that I was never going to be able to go back. My leaving Cuba would torn me apart. It was very hard to leave. My visa had not arrived, so my whole family left, and I was left behind. I took them to the ferry boat. They all left. That was the scariest day in my life. I remember going home, kneeling in front of Jesus, with my head in the bed, and praying and crying and say, "Oh Jesus, save me, save me."
So what do we do? Whatever each one of us can do. No one likes to hear that. We all want to hear what the silver bullet is. It's easy for us to wait for instruction, for someone to tell us what needs to be done and how to go about it.
In the population at large, there's a small number of people, eyes to see, ears to hear. They've got it.
We're going to have to learn how to stand up for ourselves. I say that you're not going to make a scapegoat out of me, right? I will stand with the scapegoat and suffer with them. But if you come to scapegoat me, you got a battle on your hands.
The conclusion that everyone would come to is something very, very awful and wrong is going on. It's going on in America. It's going on everywhere in the world simultaneously, all at one time.
So what happens if we don't get strong? What will the tyrants do? Let's get back to that quote from Ronald Reagan, who said, "We maintain the peace through our strength. Weakness only invites aggression."
Now is the time to be bold and ferocious, have enormous backbone.
If scapegoats are dangerous, they will look for another scapegoat. So we should not allow ourselves to be victims, right? We should stand with victims. We should advocate for victims. This is our role in society.
But the reality is we have to ask ourselves, what can I do? This takes effort on our part. If you have the ability to stand up for what is true, for freedom, then you have the right, obligation, and the duty to do so.
All right, so what is my message? What is my message to the people that are listening to me? Cuba's suffering. I'm pleading with you. Don't let this happen to America. Stand up for your freedoms, for your freedom of religion. Cubans, I like to see them free. I like to see them change. Please do something. Don't let this happen to this country. Stick out for your principles. Fight for them. Let everybody know what is right and what is wrong.
And that's it. Wow. Let me tell you something. Let me share something with you here really, really quick. Exactly what they said there towards the end, where they're talking about, you know, what do we do? What options do we have? You know, what do we do now? Now that I understand, now that I have a grip of what's really happening here and what's going on, I understand a little better. Resist, and resist some more. And the harder that they push, the harder you resist. Because the fact of the matter is, they want us to become radicalized. They want us to become violent. That's what they want. Because I've said this again before, and I hate to keep repeating myself, but I can't drive this message home any harder than this. If you become violent, they win. They win. Because then they can tell the whole world, you see, we told you that they were radicals. We told you that they were violent. And they'll point back to January 6th and they'll say, they're radicals. We told you. That's why you cannot support or stand with these people, because of what they are. No. And they're having a very, very hard time trying to grassroot or uplift that that message, or having people buy into that narrative, because we, the people, are not stupid. Okay? We're not. So what I'm telling you is, don't buy into it. Stay peaceful. Peace through strength. Don't give up the guns. Okay? Just know that they're there for you to defend yourself with and defend your family with against anybody. It doesn't matter who they are. Okay? That wants to come and strip you of your liberties and your freedom. All right? I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I hope that you learned something from this. I hope that, you know, you guys have a little bit more reflection as to where we are. I know that this was a little long, but I just wanted to go ahead and start this on this level. Basically like an introductory, opening the door to, this is why I'm doing this, and I'm doing it for you as a service, because everybody that is out there needs to know what is really going on. I don't care how old you are. I don't care what your beliefs are. I don't care where you stand politically. I'm just one of those people that I just live and let live, man. I just don't, I don't want to make this a political thing, other than just from an educational point, that you got to do what's right for you. You got to believe in what you believe in. You got to stand for truth. You got to stand for principle. And you must understand this, if anything else, that the United States of America is all we have left. There is nowhere else to go, because there's nothing left to go to. It's already been compromised. It's already been taken. It's already been lost. If we lose this one, we're done as a society. I mean, totally done. And on that note, this is our official first launch. I thank you for tuning in. I thank you for watching this. Please, if you're getting value, like the streamer says on the bottom here, if you're getting value out of this, you know, please like, share, and most importantly, subscribe. Okay, I'm on a mission to get us to 1,000 subscribers as quickly as possible, so we can take this channel to the next level and continue to bring you content. So please tell your friends, tell your neighbors, tell whoever you think may have an interest and get value out of this type of content. And again, please like, share, and subscribe. We will catch you guys in the next one. I thank you for being here today. God bless. And I really appreciate the support. And for that, let's just take it away, and we'll catch you on the next one, like I said. Thank you.